So is that looking okay? I hope everybody can see that. Please let us know right away if you can't. So today I am presenting a program on Introduction to Use of DNA for Genealogy. This will be rather a DNA 101 type course. And as such, it will serve as a review for some of us, and I hope it will be helpful for others just getting started with analyzing their DNA matches and leveraging DNA test results as a genealogical tool, or perhaps enticing you to do a DNA test to begin with. I am still learning myself more ways to make my DNA results work for me, so I hope this program can help you begin to make breakthroughs in your own research. Maybe you or a family member received a DNA kit for Christmas. Perhaps you've already done one or more DNA tests, but have not yet dived into how the results might help you advance your research. If you have DNA results at more than one company's site, you may not be sure just how each company's results might provide helpful insights. And just a note, there will be time for questions at the end of the presentation, but I would request, please, that you save your questions to the end. You can post them in the Q&A on the Zoom screen, and we'll deal with those after the program. So, you ready to get started? Here we go. Hang on. Kathy, can you unmute yourself? Are you not able to see? I'm assuming everyone can see this. Okay. So what is your goal? Do you want to understand your ethnicity? Are you hoping to find biological family or distant cousins? Perhaps you want to break down genealogical brick walls. I know that's one of my goals always. Or do you wish to investigate family or medical mysteries? You may have more than one goal for DNA testing, but it's best to focus on one objective at a time. I know for myself, I want to work on brick walls. I want to see if I have a known family out there. I have a number of goals for testing, but I have to rein myself in and not try to do everything at once. Set a realistic goal, and I recommend that you write out your goal, be specific, make a research plan, and set down the steps that you plan to follow in order to keep track of what you are doing as you analyze your DNA matches. I can't stress this enough, to be emotionally prepared for DNA surprises. Everyone thinks, oh, all those weird things happen in other people's family. And let me tell you, they don't. They happen in everyone's family. We had a recent DNA, well, not so recent, DNA meeting where we asked how many people had found DNA surprises as a result of DNA testing, and every hand in the room went up. So we all experience unexpected DNA results in one way or another. For me, I discovered that my grandfather was not the child of the man who we assumed was his dad. For my husband, he found an unknown half-sister that his father had created at some point when nobody knew about it. You might discover your biological heritage is different than you believed. Your DNA map may show surprising countries of origin. I know for me, one of my first clues that my granddad was not the biological father of the man we thought is we should have had DNA ties to Newfoundland, and it was a big black hole, no DNA ties to Newfoundland. So that was a clue. You may find previously unknown close family members among your DNA matches. So be emotionally prepared for surprises, because there will be surprises large and small. They're not all negative. Some of them can be positive. I mean, you know, you follow the DNA breadcrumbs where they lead. Your DNA results may point to an NPE in your family line, and this is described variously as not parent expected or non-parental event, or sometimes referred to as misattributed parentage. This is what happened with my grandfather. It turned out that he was the child of someone else, and I will never know what the circumstances were. And as you can see from the graphic here, an NPE can result from any number of circumstances. And it's probably unlikely that you will never be able to figure out the details of what exactly happened to create the misattributed parental event that affects your ancestors, unless somebody's left letters or something, which one would always hope for. Anyway, be ready for the unexpected because you will find it. There are 3 types of DNA tests: mitochondrial DNA, which is passed down from a mother to her children; Y-DNA, which is passed down from a father to his son; and autosomal DNA, which is passed down from both parents to their children. As you can see here, mitochondrial DNA, both sons and daughters receive mitochondrial DNA from their mother, but only daughters can pass down their mother's mitochondrial DNA to her children. And mitochondrial DNA reveals a woman's mother's line back through time and can reveal the ancient migration patterns and ancestry of your maternal line. Mitochondrial DNA test results are generally less useful for genealogical research, and that's because your ancestor in common with a mitochondrial DNA match could be thousands of years ago, which is way before historical records and the ability to do genealogy. And at this time, only one major company offers mitochondrial DNA testing. Y-DNA is passed down from father to son through the Y chromosome, and it reveals a man's father's father's father back through time and can show ancient migration patterns over many generations as well. But because Y-DNA mutates more frequently than mitochondrial DNA, a Y-DNA test can be useful, potentially, for discovering an unknown male ancestor. A Y-DNA test can help to determine the ethnic heritage of an unknown father. My husband, for example, knew who his father was, but his father was born to an unwed mother, and we never knew who the father's dad was. But by doing a Y-DNA test, we determined that my husband's unknown grandfather was Ashkenazi Jewish, which was surprising since his dad had been raised Mormon. Only males have a Y chromosome, therefore only males can take a Y-DNA test. And at this time, there's only one major company that offers Y-DNA testing. Autosomal DNA is the most common type of DNA test, and it analyzes the 22 chromosomes you inherit from both parents. So as you can see from this graphic, you not only get all the DNA information in your father's 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 line and your mother's 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 line, but all those other lines that intermarried with everybody back through time. An autosomal DNA test is ideal for discovering your heritage and ancestors because it includes all your father's ancestors and all your mother's ancestors. And every major testing company offers an autosomal test. It is the most useful for aiding in genealogical research. DNA tests involve providing a cheek swab or a saliva sample. Kits come with easy-to-follow directions on how to take the test and return the kit. So you'll want to be sure to return your kit promptly. And remember, this is really important, remember to register your kit right away using the unique numerical code that's assigned to your kit. That way, when your kit arrives at the testing company, they know who it belongs to. So registering your kit ensures that your DNA results will be linked to the correct tester. And the instructions always explain how to register the kit. For the most useful DNA analysis, you should link a family tree to your DNA test at each testing company whenever possible. And I say whenever possible because not all companies currently permit linking a tree to your DNA results. Some features that DNA companies have in common include you are provided with an ethnicity estimate. That's that's the pie chart or the list or whatever that says, oh, you're, 36% England and you're 7% Swedish and you're 59% Italian or whatever. You receive a list of DNA matches. You have the ability at each company to download your raw DNA data. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. You can communicate with your DNA matches, and you are permitted to manage DNA kits for other people. Most companies also allow you to build or upload by GEDCOM a family tree and link it to your DNA results. Most companies provide a way to group your matches into shared DNA match groups. Most, but not all, companies do not share DNA data with law enforcement except by court order. Some DNA companies allow you to import your raw DNA data from other companies, and this can be a budget-conscious way to get your DNA results into additional databases. Usually there's a modest fee to unlock the analytical tools at the receiving company. There are two DNA companies, however, 23andMe and Ancestry DNA, who do not accept imported data. Those two companies require testers to purchase DNA kits from those respective companies. Ancestry has frequent discounts on DNA kits, and 23andMe has occasional discounts, usually around Thanksgiving, Christmas, Father's Day, Mother's Day, times like that. So if you're on a budget, look for a discounted purchase price. So I mentioned about importing your DNA. Importing your DNA data refers to the process of downloading your raw DNA data from one genetic testing company and then uploading it to another company's platform. This allows you to see your DNA data and ethnicity estimate as analyzed by the new company, and also potentially to find new DNA matches at a different service, because there are many people who only test at a single company, and each company uses its own algorithms in analyzing your DNA results. I've found, particularly at 23andMe, that people who test at 23andMe often do not test anywhere else. So if you test there, you're going to want to download your data from there and upload it into other companies, because that will enable you to fish in as many DNA ponds as possible if you're looking to find matches who can help you break through, for instance, some of your genealogical brick walls. Some companies show your DNA communities where your DNA has been recently. You can see here from Ancestry, they give you sort of this idea of where your DNA arrived in the United States. Some companies allow you to attach notes to your DNA results to each of your matches. And I am an extensive user of the notes. It helps me remember, especially if I've figured out how I connect to that match. As you can see here, I've sort of done a trail of our common ancestral couple and how this match connects to that same couple, so that I don't have to redo that research each time I look at that match. Some companies also offered colored dots as a way to group your matches. So if you create a group of people who all descend from, say, this Siteman-Nukin group, you can pick a colored dot and make a Siteman-Nukin group, and then put that colored dot on everyone who is a shared match in that group. It's a very helpful way to just keep yourself organized. One company, MyHeritage, offers an auto-clustering tool to show your DNA match groups. Clustering is also offered at several third-party websites, which I'm not really going to go into today. That's a bit more advanced. But these sites include DNA Painter, GEDmatch, and Genetic Affairs also provide a clustering tool. Some companies have features that show where your family tree overlaps with the trees of your DNA matches. So this is one of the reasons it's important to link a tree to your DNA results. At Ancestry DNA, this feature is called Through Lines, and this is what it looks like. So here you see a common ancestor, and here's a DNA match here that shares 362 centimorgans, and here's another one that shares 123 centimorgans, and here's another one shares 243 centimorgans, and this is, well, actually me, but and this feature is called Through Lines. And Through Lines, remember, provide clues, not facts, because they're based on people's family trees. And family trees are only as accurate as the care taken by the researcher to build it. So when you find these clues, you need to do your own research to confirm any Through Lines hint. Think of it as a hint. It's another hint about your genealogy. At MyHeritage, they have a similar feature. It's called Theory of Family Relativity. And just like the Through Lines at Ancestry, these are clues, not facts. And at MyHeritage, sometimes they will piece together, this would be my tree here, and this is someone else's tree, and then this is a third tree. And sometimes they'll piece together 4 or 5 trees, and they'll also frequently give you more than one path to the conclusion that you are connected to this person through a specific ancestral couple. So I always investigate all the different paths, and I look at the trees or the records. Sometimes it's records hints at MyHeritage, and sometimes it's other people's tree. And I look at this little circle here, and now they're saying this is 100% accurate in their view. So you look for the higher accuracy paths when reviewing these theories of family relativity. And then you have to do your own research to make sure it all pans out. And sometimes it doesn't. And what's interesting at MyHeritage is you have the option of actually rejecting a through lines connection if you discover that it's bogus. And I've done that a couple of times because there are some bogus ones just based on weird trees that make no sense. Unfortunately, at Ancestry, you do not have at this time the ability to reject a through lines hint. And that's something I wish they'd come up with. Some companies will indicate your maternal and or paternal haplogroup. And haplogroup information is not only useful for confirming where your ancestors were thousands of years ago, it can also help you determine if you and your match are related. And your haplogroup is generally displayed like on, my sort of vague general haplogroup. My maternal haplogroup is H11. And of course, since I'm female, I don't have a male haplogroup. And there are pros, and we'll talk, by the way, about definitions of these terms a little bit later in the program. There are pros and cons at each company. Some companies have larger databases of test takers. The company with by far the largest database is Ancestry. Some companies offer unique analytical tools, as we've just shown a few of them there. Others offer the test that includes a health analysis. Some company websites are easier to navigate than others. And some companies do not permit linking a family tree to your DNA result, which I consider to be a real handicap. So let's talk about 23andMe. Their features include they offer an autosomal DNA test or a DNA plus health test. But at 23andMe, you cannot link a family tree to your DNA results, and you must purchase the kit from 23andMe in order to test. It has something called a beta DNA tree feature, which may or may not be accurate. And this is a tree that's comprised of a handful of your DNA matches that they have placed in descending from either maternal or paternal lineages as they think, where they think they fit if you were to put them in a family tree. The problem I found with it is they frequently don't have enough generations in between you and the match once I've figured out who the match actually is. So it's very definitely still beta. Your DNA test results at 23andMe will show your maternal haplogroup and your paternal haplogroup if you are male. It also shows, very interestingly, the percentage of Neanderthal DNA, if any. And my Neanderthal DNA is something like, I don't know, I have 42% more Neanderthal DNA than, the average person or something. 23andMe is particularly helpful for finding DNA matches outside the US, especially if you have ancestors from South America or Africa. 23andMe used to have a chromosome browser, and we'll define that in a minute. The chromosome browser enabled users to visualize shared DNA segments with matches. They could see which chromosomes they matched a match on and where on that chromosome the matching segment was located. But due to a security breach in 2023, which you've probably all heard about by now, they disabled the chromosome browser, and as of now, it has not been reactivated. So this adversely impacts in-depth DNA match analysis. They do have a relatives in common tool, which was temporarily deactivated, but has been reactivated. So you can still use that function to see who your shared matches at 23andMe are, and that can help you figure out how you match those people, hopefully. Ancestry DNA features include, it offers an autosomal test, only an autosomal test. You can link a family tree to your DNA results, either by building the tree directly from your DNA kit or linking an existing tree. You must purchase the kit from Ancestry in order to test. And as I mentioned before, it does have the largest database of test takers. Ancestry DNA has no chromosome browser and does not show haplogroups. And unfortunately, for those of us on a budget, it's actually most useful when it's used in conjunction with their pricey tree building subscription. And very definitely, to get the most out of your Ancestry DNA results, you would want to subscribe to Pro Tools, which is at $10 a month. And one of the Pro Tools is an enhanced shared matching protocol that's actually very helpful, because it not only shows how your matches match to you, how closely they match to you, but when you pulled up a shared match group and you select one of those matches to analyze, it shows how everybody who shares DNA with you and that selected match, how much how closely related they are to your selected match. So, I mean, I might share 25 centimorgans with somebody who's a fifth cousin, but that shared match's sister may be among the group, or an uncle or an aunt. So that can be helpful as you try to get research clues from your DNA match list. Ancestry DNA is excellent for finding matches in North America, and it is especially useful for people with ancestry from the British Isles, Scandinavia, and Western Europe. It's also becoming useful for matches in the UK, Australia, and New Zealand. It does show accurate DNA communities, and DNA communities, as I showed you on an earlier slide, show where your DNA has been in the last 250 to 300 years, and that's within genealogically relevant time, which means you can potentially find records to support your research. They also offer through lines hints. A couple of the free features at Ancestry DNA include this colored dot grouping tool and an easy-to-use notes feature where you can add a note to each of your DNA matches. Features that cost extra would be this tag, the tree tag feature, which is something that you can use to tag people in your family tree at Ancestry who are DNA matches. And it also includes notes and comments where you can talk about DNA match information and add that to that person in your tree, your family tree. But of course, having access to these tools requires the subscription to the tree building membership at Ancestry, which, by the way, is on half price right now. So if you have not done tree building at Ancestry and you want to do it, blitz it maybe for 6 months, they've got a 50% off price right now. So that might be worth considering. Here are some things that you need Pro Tools in order to access. This is called Side View. And as you can see here, it shows parent 1 and parent 2, and then the different ethnic heritage you receive from each of these parents. Of course, it's up to you to figure out which parent is your father and which parent is your mother. And honestly, when they first came out with this tool, my parents had such similar looking half circles that I literally could not tell them apart, even though one came from Massachusetts and has Scottish and British and Dutch ancestry, and the other one came from Kansas and she had Scots-Irish and French-Canadian ancestry, but their little DNA circles looked the same. It took a lot of work actually for me to figure out which one was my mom and which one was my dad, but I did ultimately figure it out. So, but this can be helpful as you analyze your matches. And now when you get your DNA match list at Ancestry, if you have not figured out which one is your dad and which one is your mom, it'll just say, oh, this person matches you in parent 1. And the next one on this list, oh, she might match you on parent 2. So they break it down at least into 2 parental groups on your matches. Family tree DNA offers an autosomal DNA test, several levels of the Y-DNA test, and a mitochondrial DNA test. This is the one company that offers the Y-DNA and mitochondrial tests. But you can no longer link a tree to your DNA results at Family Tree DNA. They recently discontinued the tree part at Family Tree DNA. And so you had to move your tree over to MyHeritage. And so it links to your tree at MyHeritage instead. You can upload your raw autosomal DNA data from another site into Family Tree DNA and then pay a modest fee to unlock their analytical tools. If you want to take a Y-DNA test or a mitochondrial DNA test, however, you do have to purchase those tests from Family Tree DNA. But I have to say, once you have purchased that test, for instance, I purchased a DNA test for my husband, and then later on he decided he wanted to do the mitochondrial test. So I purchased that test, and you don't have to retest. They just use the sample that they've already received and analyze it for the mitochondrial DNA. Only they evidently didn't have enough DNA, so they sent a free replacement test. And so, yeah, he had to send in a second test, but it was free. So once you paid the one price, if there's not enough there, they'll actually send you what you need. So you can upload your raw autosomal DNA data into Family Tree DNA, and you can sort your matches by maternal and paternal lines. And this company does offer a chromosome browser. Family Tree DNA has a unique feature called Ancient Origins, which compares your DNA to DNA from archaeological dig sites in Europe to show your DNA's relation to ancient European groups. So each of these little spades is a dig site, and over here you can see that the red are the hunter-gatherers, and the green are the farmers, and the blue are the Middle Age invaders, and black is non-European, but evidently not on this map. Family tree DNA results are especially useful for people with Jewish ancestry because they have a particular algorithm that helps to offset endogamy, and we'll talk about endogamy a little bit later. Family Tree DNA also offers numerous DNA surname projects, some of which are mitochondrial DNA projects, some of them are Y-DNA projects, and some of them also accept autosomal testers. There are haplogroup projects. They have DNA projects for not only for various surnames, but ethnic heritage groups and geographic groups. Participating in a group project can help you determine which ancestral group is yours, especially if you're researching a common surname. So, for example, my mother's maiden name was Miller. Oh my gosh, one of the most common names in the world. And she didn't know much about her ancestry because we were all estranged from her dad for my entire lifetime. So here we are, we've got these Miller matches, and I managed to find a Miller third cousin who was willing to do a Y-DNA test. So he did a Y-DNA test, and then I was able to join him to a couple of Miller group projects. And as a result of that, he's in this rather small group of Miller matches who all match to this guy, Christian Miller, who was born around 1700 in Switzerland. And so it's like, oh, there's a clue. So the participating in a group project can really be helpful. It can also be helpful in a negative way. When I suspected that my grandfather was not the son of George William Barrett and was the son of somebody else instead, I convinced several of my paternal cousins to DNA test so that we could iron this out. And I have a single male first cousin who is the son of one of my father's brothers. I have no siblings, so no help there. But and he did a Y-DNA test because he presumably would be a Barrett. And I put him in the Barrett surname group. Well, he's way at the bottom of the list, along with a handful of other Barretts who are completely unaffiliated with Barrett DNA. So even though that's a negative result, it helped to confirm my conclusion that, oh, our granddad was not a Barrett after all. So if you are male and if you do a Y-DNA test at Family Tree DNA, I strongly encourage you to join some the Y-DNA surname group for your father's line. Family tree DNA allows law enforcement agencies to request permission to use investigative genetic genealogy matching, or IgGM, in order to identify the remains of deceased persons, John and Jane Does, or help identify suspects by using familial DNA matching who have committed violent crimes, including murder, rape, and threats to national security. This is the one company that does not require a court order in order for law enforcement to access their database. The testers are opted out of this law enforcement sharing by default. However, users can opt in to sharing with law enforcement. And I personally have chosen to opt in because if my DNA can help identify a Jane Doe or some rapist somewhere, I have no problem with that. MyHeritage. MyHeritage has a lot of features. They offer autosomal DNA testing. You can link a family tree to your DNA results. You can upload your raw autosomal DNA data from another site into MyHeritage and then pay a modest fee to unlock the analytical tools there. And before Christmas, or I think maybe up through the end of December, they had a deal where you could upload your DNA data and have free access to the analytical tools without having to pay the extra fee. So look for those deals around holiday time next year if you're thinking about transferring your data to MyHeritage. MyHeritage offers notes and colored dot grouping features, and they also have a chromosome browser. They offer that theory of family relativity to users with linked trees, which I showed you before. And it's the only company that offers that auto cluster feature. That's those various squares of colored squares that go down in a diagonal line that I showed on an earlier slide. MyHeritage has the largest database of European testers. Therefore, it is excellent for finding European DNA matches. MyHeritage is a good site if your ancestors were recent European immigrants. You can upload and store photos for free at MyHeritage as well, but a subscription is required to use the photo editing tools. MyHeritage tree building subscribers can use all the DNA analytical tools without paying any extra fee. And if you have a tree building subscription at MyHeritage, you can access their large database of records. They also have added a bunch of newspaper records to that site recently. And with a subscription, you can utilize various photo editing tools. Also, in 2021, MyHeritage acquired the French genealogy site Philae. And with a subscription, genealogists can access Philae's database of digitized French records. Living DNA. Their features include, they offer an autosomal DNA test or a DNA plus health test, and it shows a maternal haplogroup and a Y haplogroup if you are male. You can upload your raw autosomal data from another company into Living DNA and pay a modest fee to unlock their most recent, what they call ancestry upgrade. You cannot link a tree to your DNA results, but you can create groups in its relatively new Matchbox feature. The Matchbox feature I discovered actually is quite new because prior to this, you had no way of grouping your DNA matches together, and it was insanely frustrating. Living DNA has by far the smallest database of users, and the dashboard I find is somewhat difficult to navigate, and there's just not a lot there. Living DNA does, however, provide high-resolution ethnicity estimates for the United Kingdom, showing strongest DNA connection down to the county level in the UK. And it can be useful for people with English, Scottish, Irish, and Welsh ancestry. So you see here, here's my map. I've got some DNA matches in a bunch of England and Scotland, but I also have like white areas where I don't have matches. So I guess that's what that's about. Additional features include you can learn how much of your DNA is attributed to Neanderthal or Denisovan ancestors, learn how much of your DNA is shared with ancient Vikings, or discover the Greek, Roman, or Egyptian population groups your DNA most resembles. But each of these additional features requires a one-time $20 fee. So far, the only thing I've done is I randomly for Christmas, I purchased the classic Greek, Roman, Egyptian group and discovered that I most closely resemble something in northern England, sort of where the Romans had Hadrian's Wall. I can't recommend this enough. Crowdsource your DNA. The most economical way to find as many DNA matches as possible is to purchase kits at Ancestry DNA and or 23andMe, then transfer your raw data to MyHeritage, Family Tree DNA, and Living DNA. And as I mentioned before, Ancestry has frequent discounts on kits and 23andMe has occasional deals. Test as many family members as you can. Unfortunately, I'm an only child, so I have no siblings. My parents are deceased. All my aunts and uncles are deceased. I have a fair number of cousins on my dad's side of the family, and I've tested as many of them as would agree to test. And on my mom's side of the family, I only have a single cousin left, and he wants nothing to do with it. So I'm I'm left sort of not with a lot of people to test. But if you have an enthusiastic extended family, test as many people as you can. Parents, if they're still available, siblings, cousins, aunts, and uncles. The more relatives you test, the better able you will be to group your shared DNA matches into paternal and maternal groups, and the more clues you will have into how you match with your unknown DNA matches. Because, like for instance, among myself and my 5 paternal cousins who have tested, we all share wildly different amounts of DNA with some of our more distant shared matches, and some of their test results are more useful to me in trying to figure out how we connect to those distant matches than my own results are, because they just share more DNA with that person than I do. And because DNA inheritance is so random, the more people you test, just the more information you have to work with. So let's talk about terminology. A centimorgan is a unit of measurement. Your list of DNA matches will show how much DNA you share with a match in centimorgans, and sometimes a DNA match is shown as a percentage, but there's an easy way to translate a percentage into centimorgans using the shared centimorgan tool, which I'll talk about in a minute. Generally, the more centimorgans and segments you share with a DNA match, the closer your cousin relationship is to that match. But if you have 2 matches with the same number of shared centimorgans, the match with fewer but longer shared segments will be the closer match. Some DNA companies indicate your maternal and paternal haplogroup as part of your DNA results summary. A haplogroup is a genetic population of people who share an ancient common ancestor along the paternal or maternal line. The common ancestor may have lived thousands of years ago. A chromosome browser is an analytical tool that allows a DNA tester to do a comparison with 1 or more DNA matches to see which specific segments of DNA are shared in common and to see the location of the shared segments on 1 or more particular chromosomes. A chromosome browser is valuable in order to confirm precisely how you connect to your DNA match, and also to confirm that, in fact, you connect with that DNA match from the common ancestral couple that you research suggests you descend from. So here are a few strategies for working with your DNA matches. Look at your closest matches to find first and second cousins. Cousins are key to separating paternal matches from maternal matches. Review the family trees of your cousins for clues to identify second cousins who are especially helpful in analyzing your matches. Once you have identified a second cousin and how that person descends from the same ancestral couple that you do, that person becomes your best known match. And I want to thank Diane Southard, who offers multiple DNA webinars every year. She has a blog called Your DNA Guide, and I want to thank her for teaching this concept about establishing your best known match, because that's the key to figuring out the other people who share with your best known match. So then you use the shared matches tool, which is sometimes called in common with, to find people who match both you and your best known match. These people form a DNA group in which all the people in the group descend from a common ancestral couple. Now, it's possible they might not all descend at the same generation. So, for instance, some of your matches may descend from your great-grandparents. Other matches in this group may descend from your second great-grandparents, who are the parents of the two people, the great-grandparents. But they're all going to be somehow connected to that ancestral group. So use grouping tools such as colored dots or notes or both to tag each DNA match in the group. You can also use a spreadsheet or Word document to organize your DNA groups. You have no idea how many Word documents I have with notes about my DNA matches. By grouping your matches, you can ultimately determine which ancestral line you share with a match. You can then investigate your DNA matches tree for clues that will aid your own research. Remember, other people's trees are clues, so they require research to confirm. You may find that your DNA matches have added photos and document images to their linked trees that will be useful for your research. I found a lot of interesting documents and photos by scrolling through my DNA matches trees because maybe they got more of the family stuff than my line of the family did. By determining how you match, you can communicate with your DNA matches to confirm genealogical details and family stories. So grouping is a key strategy. You want to name your groups. You can name your groups after the various ancestral surnames, starting with 8 named groups, one for each of your 8 great-grandparents. Maybe number your groups as well, or begin with 16 named groups, one for each of your second great-grandparents. You can do this even if you do not yet know the names of all your second great-grandparents. That would be where you'd want to, number, do some kind of a numbering system. Be sure to link a tree to your DNA results and research your genealogy to determine who were your great-grandparents and second great-grandparents, and then add them to your linked tree. This will help to generate through lines and theory of family relativity hints to be explored. So now let's talk about cousins. You share grandparents with your first cousins, great-grandparents with your second cousins, and great-great-grandparents with your third cousins. And the amount of DNA you share with your cousins decreases with each added generation between you and your common ancestral couple. So an easy way to keep track of which kind of cousin goes to which kind of grandparent is to count the G's. 1 G is a first cousin, grandparents, only has 1 G. 2 G's is a second cousin, great-grandparents, 2 G's. 3 G's is a third cousin, great-great-grandparents have 3 G's. Beyond the level of fifth great-grandparents, you are much less likely to share any DNA at all. Removed cousins. This is such a confusing concept. Removed cousins are in a different generation from your common ancestor than you are. They can be either in a younger generation or in an older generation from you. For example, you are a first cousin once removed to the children of your first cousin. You are a first cousin twice removed to the grandchildren of your first cousin, just as they are to you. I find that I need charts like this, so you can easily Google removed cousins chart to see examples such as this one, which shows who are cousins and who are removed cousins. And remember, the percentage of shared DNA drops with each generation or removed generation away from a common ancestor. Half cousins. Half cousins are related to you by only one of your ancestors, but not by an ancestral couple. For example, if your grandmother married more than one spouse, you would be a half first cousin to grandchildren of your grandmother and her other spouse, the grandfather you do not share. Your children would be half second cousins to the children of your half first cousin, and so on. So here's a chart that shows easily half cousin, how half cousins work. So here's your ancestor with one spouse and the other spouse, half siblings, half first cousins, half second cousins. So we'll look at a couple more strategies. Evaluate the closeness of each of your DNA matches. Try to identify the closer matches first. Parent-child relationships and full sibling relationships will always be 100% evident. Each DNA testing company provides an estimated range of cousin relationship gauged by the amount of DNA shared between you and your match. You will see the quantity of shared centimorgans, which we just talked about in terminology, of DNA, which is sometimes expressed as a percentage, the number of shared segments, and the length of the longest segment. Keep in mind the range of potential relationships with your DNA matches increases as the amount of shared DNA decreases. So you can see here, I've entered an example in the shared centimorgan tool of 982 centimorgans, and it is 100% going to be one of these half dozen or so relationships. I entered 57 centimorgans over here, and you can see, well, there's a 29% it might be any of these, and a 21% it might be some of those. So at 18% it could be any of these, I don't know what, dozen or more. So as you can see, as the relationship becomes more distant, the potential precise cousin relationship possibilities increase. But be undaunted. Although many relationships are technically possible between you and your DNA match, you can often discount a number of potential relationships based on age. If you are 72 years old, you are obviously not going to be the great-grandchild of a DNA match who is in her 20s. And a match who is my age is not going to be my grandchild. Of course, things get trickier with more distant cousin relationships because, you could have a really old set of parents and you're matching to their youngest child, and it seems like based on age, they shouldn't be the level of cousin that they are. So it can get tricky once you're in the more distant relationships. So here's an example from Ancestry. In order to see the number of segments and the longest segment, your DNA match shows this screen up at the top, and you click on this thing that says 5% shared DNA, 319 centimorgans, 17 segments, and that brings up this, and that shows your longest segment here and the amount of unweighted DNA if you, and that will change sometimes from at the level of 90 centimorgans or less. And that's because Ancestry has what they call a timber algorithm. So for instance, you might have a DNA match that shows you share 25 centimorgans across one segment, and you click on this little line here and you discover, yes, it's 25 segments. You'll want to we're picking up with more strategies. Evaluate the closeness of each of your DNA matches. Try to identify the closer matches first. Parent-child relationships and full sibling relationships will always be evident. Each DNA company provides an estimated range of cousin relationship gauged by the amount of DNA shared between you and your match. You will see the quantity of shared centimorgans, CMs, of DNA, sometimes expressed as a percentage, the number of shared segments, and the length of the longest segment. Keep in mind, the range of potential relationships with your DNA matches increases as the amount of shared DNA decreases. So in this example, you can see on the left, with 982 centimorgans of shared DNA, the relationship you have with your match is going to be 100% one of these half dozen relationships. Whereas if you only share 57 centimorgans of DNA, you might have, you might be in this category of relationship or this category, or down here in 18% probability that you share one of these dozen relationships. So the number of potential relationships increases at the same time the amount of shared DNA decreases. But be undaunted. Although many relationships are technically possible between you and your DNA match, you can often discount a number of potential relationships based on age. If you are 72 years old, for example, you are obviously not going to be the great-grandchild of a DNA match who is in her 20s. Conversely, a match who is my age is not going to be my grandchild, I hope. Of course, things get trickier with more distant cousin relationships. So this is an example from Ancestry DNA. And in order to find out the longest segment, you have to click on this line here, which then brings up this menu over here. The predicted relationship is a half first cousin once removed, or a second cousin. And it shows the total amount of shared DNA, the total number of segments, and the longest segment. You can click on, as I said, you can click on the line to see the amount of shared DNA, to see the length of the longest segment. And you'll notice something called unweighted DNA here. When you have DNA matches of 90 centimorgans or less, you may discover that the unweighted amount of DNA does not match the total amount of DNA. And that's because Ancestry has what they call timber algorithm, which helps offset endogamy. So for instance, if you have a DNA match and maybe you share 25 centimorgans of DNA with them on one segment, but then you click on this line and you discover that the unweighted amount of shared DNA isn't 25 centimorgans, it's 42 centimorgans. Well, that can potentially indicate endogamy, which is always a problem when you're analyzing your DNA matches. Here are some examples from other testing companies of how they display the projected DNA relationships. So 23andMe shows a second cousin once removed, and they show DNA as a percentage rather than centimorgans. But in a minute, you'll see how we can put this percentage into the shared centimorgan project and determine the amount of shared centimorgans. At Family Tree DNA, they show the amount of shared DNA, and if the longest block matches, then you know it's only one segment. Here, the longest block doesn't match, so you know it's more than one segment. And at MyHeritage, they have a different way of showing cousins. Here, they show the second cousin's grandson or the second cousin's son, and that's sort of a different way of saying a second cousin twice removed. In cases where the total amount of shared DNA is similar, the match with a longer segment will be the closer match. So here on the left, you can see that there's one match who shares nearly 107 centimorgans of DNA, but it's 5 segments, and the longest segment is only 30 centimorgans. And below that, there's a match who shares 92 centimorgans of DNA, but the largest segment is 86 centimorgans, and there's only 2 shared segments. So the match with the 92 centimorgans of shared DNA and the 86 centimorgan longest segment will be a much closer match. than the one above, even though the total amount of shared DNA in the one above is a slightly higher number of centimorgans. And you can see the same thing displayed on the right. They both say they're a second cousin to fourth cousin relationship. This is a single segment of 62 centimorgans versus shared DNA of 59 centimorgans, where the longest block is 26. The person at the top here is likely to be a closer match than the person underneath. The Shared Centimorgan project is super helpful for helping you figure out these DNA relationships. So here, for instance, if you look at the half aunt or half uncle, the number at the top, 871, shows the average number of centimorgans you would share with a half aunt or half uncle. The numbers below that, 492 to 1,315, show the range of centimorgans you might share with that relationship person. So you might share as little as 492 centimorgans with a half aunt, or you might share as much as 1,315 centimorgans with a half aunt. At the Shared Centimorgan Project, you can enter shared DNA amounts either in centimorgans up here or as a percentage down here, which will then show you what the equivalent number of centimorgans would be. So for this example, I used 109 centimorgans of shared DNA, you can see it up here, which yields a list of potential relationships, which are all down here. And to explore each potential relationship, you can click on these one by one to see what they call a histogram. And the histogram is this bell curve graphic over here. So at 109 centimorgans, I clicked on the second cousin once removed to see what the histogram looks like. And as you can see from this bell curve, the second cousin once removed is a high likelihood relationship based on the fact that it's at the top of the bell curve. Now, let's talk about potential complications. Hopefully, we will not have any more technical complications. Endogamy. Endogamy results when a group of people lives in geographical or cultural isolation and intermarries within that close group over an extended period of time. This results in a situation where descendants are all related to the same original population of ancestors in many different ways. Endogamy makes it more difficult to determine how you might be connected to your DNA matches, since the amount of shared DNA might suggest a closer generation of connection than actually exists. And here are just a few examples of endogamous populations: French Canadians and Cajuns, Ashkenazi Jewish, Pacific Islanders, Icelandic people, Amish and Mennonites, Newfoundlanders. Endogamy can occur among descendants of any isolated group, including ancestry from a limited founding population. And pretty much all of us are going to experience some degree of endogamy as we work back through time with our DNA matches and our research. For me personally, I have Acadians, Cajuns, and French Canadians, so that's an endogamous group. But I also have an endogamous group of Pennsylvania Dutch who just lived in the same county for 250 years, and so I'm distantly related to practically everybody in that original group. My husband, on the other hand, has an Ashkenazi Jewish grandfather, and so, you wouldn't believe how many DNA matches he has. But they're all fairly distant, and it's hard to figure out where they fit in. Pedigree collapse. Pedigree collapse occurs when genetically related people, such as first or second cousins, have children together. This results in the same ancestral couples appearing multiple times in the family tree, causing the tree to collapse at the top. This makes it more difficult to determine where you connect with your more distant DNA matches. Marriage between cousins was quite common in the past, so most family trees will contain occasional instances of pedigree collapse, especially in earlier ancestral generations. Pedigree collapse can become endogamy if it happens repeatedly over many generations. For me personally, I found a pair of second great grandparents who were first cousins to each other, and so there's my little collapse at the top of my tree. What pedigree collapse looks like in your tree. So without pedigree collapse, the number of ancestors keeps doubling with each generation back, and your tree resembles a triangle. When you have pedigree collapse at the top of your the top of your tree begins to narrow as the same ancestors show up in your tree multiple times, and the tree with pedigree collapse begins to resemble a diamond. NPEs and orphan ancestors. NPEs, or non-parental events, which we talked about at the beginning, also not parent expected or misattributed parentage, are discovered when your DNA matches do not align with your family tree research. There are numerous situations that can result in an NPE, such as extramarital affairs or one-night stands, assault, sperm or egg donation, babies switched at birth. You will likely never be able to determine what scenario led to the NPE suggested by your DNA results. NPEs are often discovered because you don't have any cousins where you expect to see them in a particular ancestral line. That's what happened with me. A lack of expected matches can also signal that your ancestor was an orphan. Recent immigration. If you are the child of parents who immigrated to the United States, you may find that you have many fewer DNA matches than do people whose ancestors have been in North America for a longer period of time. The key to discovering how you connect with your matches, of course, is determined by being able to see all the other people you match with. And if you have only a few matches, this shared match grouping becomes more difficult. Identical by state versus identical by descent. Conversely, if your ancestors have been in North America for hundreds of years, you will have many distant DNA matches with whom you share small amounts of DNA. Once you drop below 20 centimorgans of shared DNA, you may be an identical match by state. That is, you and your match might not actually share an ancestor at all. If you share short segments of DNA with your distant matches, you and your match may share DNA by coincidence. This is particularly true if you have, for instance, early New England ancestors who kind of all stayed in New England and they all kind of were there, and it was a relatively small founding population, and you get down 400 years later to today, and all of us who have early New England ancestors like I do, you've got a whole pile of DNA matches with whom you share 9 or 10 centimorgans of DNA, and you're probably never going to figure out if you match those people at all, or how you match if you do. Longer segments of DNA can confirm that you and your match are likely identical by descent. That is, you both actually descend from a common ancestor. Let's talk a minute about communicating with your matches. As you identify DNA cousins, you can communicate with your matches and work collaboratively. You can exchange information, family stories, sources, and photos. And all the DNA testing companies provide messaging protocols, either by way of in-house messaging systems or by providing email addresses of users. When messaging a DNA match, be concise and friendly in your initial contact. I can't tell you how important it is to be concise. Oh my gosh. Early on, I would, send, excruciatingly lengthy, detailed things to my DNA matches. And it's like, well, no wonder I didn't hear from them. It was like, oh my gosh, I can't wade through all this. Perhaps provide a list of surnames reflecting your 8 great-grandparents as a starting point, or respond to something of interest in your match's linked tree. You might say, oh, I see that your great-grandparents are also from County Mayo. Let's explore how we might be related. Close by expressing willingness to exchange information and sign off using at least your first name, especially if your DNA account is under a screen name like mine is. Always respond to messages you receive, even if you don't have information to share. So here are a few tips for messaging success. Use a header, such as regarding fourth cousin DNA match, or reference a surname you're hoping to explore, such as, are we both Waterberries? Ask a brief question or two where relevant. Invite the match to view your online tree if you have a public tree. Attach a friendly photo to your DNA profile. This was suggested by Diane Southard, and for the longest time, I did not have a photo attached to my DNA profile. And I finally did put one on there. I had to hunt around for a friendly-looking one. And I think it has helped a little bit. I mean, still the majority of people you contact don't contact you back, but anything to help that percentage improve is a good step to take. Say thank you at the end of your message, but don't be discouraged if your correspondent doesn't reply right away or at all. Just keep trying. My New Year's resolution this year is I want to try to contact one DNA match per week. that seems really doable. I mean, ideally, maybe I'd contact one a day, but realistically, that's probably not doable. But if I contact one a week, by the end of the year, I'll have contacted 52 new matches, and maybe I will have received information or at least a reply back from 10 or 20% of them, and maybe some useful information from a handful of that group. So, nothing ventured, nothing gained. Here are some more tips. Add a personal touch if it's relevant. Maybe you've met a relative in your match's family. Intrigue the recipient with your opening sentence. For example, I hope you can help me to solve a family mystery. Offer to exchange email addresses so that you and your match can exchange photos and document images. When messaging someone with a private tree, respectfully request permission to view their tree and indicate how you suspect you might connect with your match, to sort of give them some incentive for letting you look at their tree. When you get access to a private tree, I recommend that you take screenshots immediately so that you have the information in that tree in case your DNA match later rescinds access. Responding to matches who contact you, always respond, even if you do not have information to answer their questions. I have sort of a pat thing. I say, I'm sorry, I don't have any information right now to answer your question, but I will retain your message and I'll let you know if I find something in the future. That gives them hope. I mean, I've probably only ever contacted somebody back once or twice in my whole lifetime when I found something new, but that's what I would want to know, is that people would like to collaborate with me. Always thank them for their message and share information if you can. And if their tree, for instance, if their tree looks like it's incorrect, which that's happened to me a few times, and I figure out who they are and I figure out that their tree is a mess, I try to be as tactful as possible and say, well, my research suggests that this is how we connect, rather than just saying your tree is bogus. They don't want to hear that. And if their message is vague or confusing, feel free to ask questions in your response and keep the conversation going. And there's all kinds of DNA educational opportunities out there. Each DNA company has a frequently asked questions section and explanatory notes about how best to use DNA results at their respective site. Ancestry has a DNA Academy showing free video tutorials containing research tips and information about DNA tools. And all these links are in the handout, so you don't need to frantically copy them down. MyHeritage and 23andMe have tutorials on their YouTube channel, so you can just Google MyHeritage DNA on YouTube or 23andMe DNA on YouTube to access those. There are a number of printed sources that I like. One of the earlier ones was a guide to DNA testing and genetic genealogy. Make sure you use the second edition by Blaine Bettinger. Your DNA Guide, the book. And there's also a workbook by Diane Southard. Research Like a Pro with DNA by Diana Elder, Nicole Dyer, and Robin Worthlin, and The Complete Guide to Family Tree DNA, which was recently published by Roberta Estes. There are numerous webinars and classes, many of them free. There are a number of archived DNA presentations from Roots Tech 2021 through Roots Tech 2024, which are currently available for free viewing online. And of course, Roots Tech 2025 is coming up in early March of this year. And I guarantee there will be a number of DNA presentations in this year's Roots Tech as well. Legacy Family Tree Webinars regularly offers free programs, including a 24-hour marathon in April and multiple free programs each Friday in September during their Webtember series. And their archived programs do require a subscription, but when they offer a new webinar frequently, it is free to view for a week. Webinars are offered by genealogy societies in many places, including here. Free online classes are offered through libraries. Archived webinar videos are all over the place on YouTube and other social media platforms. There are DNA blogs and vlogs. I particularly like DNA Explained by Roberta Estes. She has many detailed blog posts on every conceivable DNA category. I also really like the Your DNA Guide blog by Diane Southard. Her posts are shorter than the ones at DNA Explained, but she's got great graphics that really show how to use your DNA results to best advantage. And I also like the DNA posts by Randy Seaver at his Genia Musings blog. He has blog posts about all kinds of genealogy-related subjects, including DNA. There are articles in Family Tree magazine, and that publication is available at libraries by subscription, or you can purchase it at bookstores. DNA Basics at the Family Search Wiki. Family Search is the free genealogical database that is overseen by the LDS Church that has records and a crowdsourced tree, and they have a wiki on every conceivable genealogical subject, including DNA. The International Society of Genetic Genealogy, ISOG, also has some articles. There are free short videos by Andy Lee with Family History Fanatics, and you can just Google DNA videos by Andy Lee to see a list. There are DNA Facebook groups, and many, many Facebook groups, and some are public and many are private, which means you have to request to join. And just a note, you do have to actually have a personal Facebook account in order to join any Facebook group. That's one of the main reasons, one of the only reasons, honestly, that I have a Facebook account is I don't use it for social media, but I use it to join genealogy-related Facebook groups. Each of the DNA testing companies has a Facebook group for DNA testers, and there are Facebook groups for different types of DNA tests, Y-DNA, mitochondrial DNA, and autosomal. There's groups for adoptees, for people conceived by sperm donor, various geographic and cultural groups, and you can just Google DNA Facebook groups to see the hundreds of possibilities. And you can collaborate with other genetic genealogists at your local genealogy society or online. Collaborate with your DNA matches. The Genealogical Society of Santa Cruz County, that's us, has a DNA special interest group. We meet in person on the first Tuesday of most months at the downtown Santa Cruz Library upstairs. So come join us if you're local. And if you want to contact me, you can contact me at staff@scgensoc.org. My name is Gail Burk, and I thank you for being with us today. And now we can take questions.